Hi there, I am Dr. Gwanya-Mdletye, a psychiatrist with a special interest in workplace mental health. In this video, I want to invite us to think through how we can create a safe space for mental illness within our work environments or within our workplaces. Because ultimately, beyond just individuals, there really does need to be a shift in the culture, in the organizational culture, from that of suspicion to that of support. A shift from that of silence and shame to that of safety, right? And in this video, I really just want us to think about the culture within our organization. Some cues that the culture in our organizations is not safe for mental illness or for people with mental illness can come in statements that are made, that are said, that are implied when people struggle with mental illness. I'll give an example. In a workplace, right, where an individual is struggling with anxiety, with debilitating anxiety, comments can be made that she is so anxious, don't give her anything important. And those comments can be taken lightly, but can have very serious and far-reaching implications in that systematically, the person living with mental illness becomes excluded from opportunities to progress, from opportunities to show up and actually do what they do best, right? So then the culture leads to that exclusion. And ultimately, the person that's struggling with anxiety can feel that, the culture is not inclusive, and therefore I either need to shrink and play to that, and then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it? Or they feel, I may as well give up. I may as well change careers. This is not working for me. Because they are unsupported. Some of the statements can be, for instance, when a person with mental illness is booked off, as we sometimes do, as psychiatrists book people off work because of their mental illness. It's not an unknown thing or an undone thing for someone who is ill. And who is not well enough to be at work, to be booked off work. But when the person is booked off for a mental illness, there can be statements that, look, he's booked off again, must be nice, right? And yet, when has it ever been nice for a person to be ill enough to not be at work? Statements, for instance, when someone struggles with mental illness, that he's always off, it must be nice. Those kind of statements become dismissive of the suffering that the person is actually experiencing, and actually portray their suffering as either a perk or as something they put on, and as though they were pretending to be unwell, right? And that really minimizes the person's suffering. And that's entrenched in the culture of the organization when statements like that can be made and let to fly, right? And sometimes you hear statements said, quite loosely, that we support mental health in this organization as long as it doesn't inconvenience anyone. Ha ha ha. And that's again incredibly dismissive, because that proviso for support in effect invalidates the illness and makes it clear that that support is actually not there at all. So when these attitudes go by unchallenged, they become the norm. They become the norm, and sometimes they become perpetual, and they're almost said in as a norm within the organization. And that's why the culture change needs to be at the crux of how we can make our organizations more safe for people that live with mental illness and less harmful. Culture is what people do when no one's looking. It's what people do almost automatically without having to think about it. And culture is what defines really how safe the organization is. Do we reward these kinds of statements? Do we tolerate these kinds of statements? Do we ignore these kinds of statements and dismiss the impact they may have on the person living with mental illness that's on the receiving end of these statements? If we don't challenge the culture in our organizations, we can never cause our organizations to become safe spaces. So I want to challenge you. If you are a manager, a leader in your organization and have influence in any way in terms of the culture in the organization, I want to challenge you to not tolerate those kind of statements when they do get made. In all fairness, they don't always get made by leadership, right? These kind of statements sometimes get made, by peers and by people on the ground in the organization. But the way in which they are received, portrays the culture in the organization. And this is what causes stigma to thrive. This is what causes the workplace ultimately to be one that one can describe as being toxic and as being unsafe for one who lives with mental illness. So let's challenge the culture in the workplace. And if you're someone who's living with mental illness, your mental well-being matters. And I hope you are working with a professional in managing and in thriving with your mental health, with your mental illness. All the best, and God bless.